the
Just for everything. We lowered the price.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. And your name is?
It's Stacey.
Thank you, Stacey.
Sorry,
Thank you,
I
Stacey.
said
You may have said it when I was in the restroom.
and yeah. We will move over here so we're not in the way. So we're gonna do a little bit of hands-on, and then hopefully, and everybody's gonna leave, and they're in the back of my truck. Everybody will go home with a tray with seed starting mix and 2 packets of seeds, and hopefully all the knowledge you need to go home and be successful with seed starting.
What happens if your house isn't warm?
So, well, that was the main things you need for, so, I mean, we can look at seeds are pretty amazing because, like, they just look like they're dead. But once you give them warmth and air and moisture, you know, I'm sure you've all seen a seed germinate or break
Yeah, that's
through
what
the
I'm
skin.
worried about. My house is freezing.
Well, what you can do, so, you can pick a warm spot, like the top of your refrigerator. When I used to live in an older house, we had radiators, and I would just put a towel over the radiator. You can
I have
also,
radiators.
so that's the thing is they do need, depending on most of the seeds that you're going to want to grow for like vegetables are things that, you know, aren't going to survive the winter here. So they're warm weather things like eggplants, tomatoes, even cold weather things like lettuces and cabbage. They all are going to germinate better warmer temperature. And usually once they germinate, the air temperature doesn't need to be as warm, but to get them to break out of their shell, they need warmth. So, I mean, in the greenhouse here, and we're gonna go in there in a little bit.
So if I put them on top of the radiator, that'll be enough.
Yeah, I mean, you
Okay.
probably wouldn't want to put them directly on the radiator. What I would do is put a towel in between because it might melt the container or whatever, or like the top of your fridge. If you've got like your hot water heater, you know, any place where you can give them some warmth. You can also buy what I've done, because the house that we moved to, my seeds just were either they were germinating, but they were just kind of stunted. I borrowed from a friend for a couple years, and then I bought my own heat mat. It looks sort of like a heating pad, but you can get it wet. It's waterproof, and that really made a big difference for me. But what we did in the greenhouse here, because when we had those really cold days and they were really cloudy, we weren't able to get the air temperature. I mean, we weren't able to get it warm enough. We were making almost like a little greenhouse within the greenhouse. So even in your house, you could do something to enclose that area. But really, the warmth is more for when they're germinating, and then they probably would be okay at, you know, room temperature, like in the 60s after they've germinated. But I wanted to just talk about, so containers. I think people think that they have to spend a lot of money to grow seeds. You know, if you go to Lowe's or you know, any gardening center or home improvement center, you've got to spend all this money, and you really don't have to. So I wanted to show you, this is kind of like if you were to buy, obviously I bought this, Jiffy was the brand, and it came with this plastic dome, and it came with little cell packs. And some of them even come with little peat pellets that you can add water and they'll expand. But you can just look around the house and use whatever you've got, especially just for when you're sowing the seeds initially. Like this was a
A deli tray.
Yeah.
Catering.
yeah, it was the top of the sushi platter. And then this,
And
yeah,
then
this
half
was
a cake right here.
yeah, this was a cake, half a cake thing.
Does it have to be plastic? Can you put it in metal?
You have metal, wood. I mean, anything. Like you could use this. I have started things like milk, save your milk cartons or wax milk cartons, cups. You could use that water bottle or maybe cut it off. Like, yeah, yogurt containers. You really only need like about this much soil in the beginning when you sow your seeds.
And you've done them in the egg cartons, even though they're paper.
I have the thing, and they're also now at the store, you'll see those peat pots, and they advertise the peat pots being great because you can stick them directly in the ground.
Right,
But
yeah.
Lauren and I were talking about this the other day. It's the end of the season when you're turning your garden over, you'll pull up that peat pot and like the roots will still be inside
Right,
of it.
it hasn't biodegraded.
But I mean, for starting seeds, you could use these, and they're really cute. Like at Easter, if you wanted to start nasturtium seeds or something, it's. But I would just really wet this really well.
Okay.
But the only thing is, I'd be concerned that this might not be deep enough, to the seeds.
Okay.
So you would only want to do things that are shallow rooted. But
You're gonna transplant them pretty soon.
yeah.
Okay.
So just look around the house, and see what you've got. And then also, like when you buy plants from the nursery, you can save all of these and just reuse them. And I know here, because we were selling plants, we want them to have the best success. We rinse them with a mild bleach solution to make sure we get rid of any possible disease. I used to do that, and over the years I've gotten lazy, and unless the plants showed signs of problems, I usually don't bother. But of course we do it here because we don't want to send any plants home with people with diseases.
So you do sell plants here?
We do, and we're going to be selling at our farm stand. We have a farm stand here every Thursday from 4 to 6, and I think is it 4 to 7 now? Okay, and we'll start selling seedlings here. Probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
What days?
Thursdays.
Well, I know when to buy the food.
So really, the method that we use here and that I use is where I start the seeds all in one flat, as opposed to starting them individually in containers. But it kind of depends on, I'm gonna spend a little more. I'm gonna actually sow my seeds, and then I'm going to transplant them and put them in containers like this. And then depending on the plant, if it's not like a tomato or pepper plant where they take longer to grow, and you've got to wait till it's pretty warm, beginning of May. We'll talk about that in a minute. To put them out, I might transplant them a second time. And so, but if it was a seed or variety of plant that's going to grow really fast, and you're going to go straight from seed to the garden, you might want to go ahead and start them directly in little containers.
So I take it from the sign on the side that you can add different varieties.
Yeah, so actually I brought my phone. I'll pass my phone around. I took some pictures of what I've done at home. And I like doing them in the flat or a container like this, starting them all at once too, because most people, if you were to fill this all up with one variety,
That's a lot.
that's going to be a lot of things. So you're going to be giving them to people. So I just will sow some rows, and I'll do a different variety each row, and then I'll transplant those. And so you can really pack a lot more in the beginning, and then.
Is it hard to separate when you transplant them? Like as far as their roots being entangled?
It's just there's a little trick to it, but we're gonna get a lot of practice on that, because I think that's the main thing. I think people get afraid because they're so fragile. You think, oh, I'm gonna break them, but they're really pretty tough, and we'll show you how we do it here. Let's see, I'm going to show you pictures.
What about this may be too early to ask this. When somebody I know, when they would plant parsnips, they would always rot. How do you prevent that?
Are they planting them like directly in the ground, you mean?
No, they plant them in.
I'll pass this around.
So just maybe there's too much moisture.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got it in the handout. We're going to talk about it, kind of what makes sense, but we can talk about now, what makes sense to start seeds indoors. Generally, root plants like carrots, parsnips, beets, radishes, because the transplanting can be kind of tough on, but if you think about it, those are the plants where you're eating the root.
Yeah.
And so generally, root plants you generally want to sow directly in the ground.
Okay.
Not to say you can't. I know people who've sowed carrots and beets indoors, but you just have to be a lot more gentle.
What about onions? Those be directly in the ground, I guess, supposed to.
Yeah, onion seeds. you could start. I've started in both indoors and outdoors. They just they take a really long time. So that's something. Sometimes it's better to start them indoors to give them a head start.
You can get them already grown, like a little slip, yeah, and then
That makes sense.
plant them up because they're in the ground for a really long time.
What do you do to make this the water go through it?
Well, and that's what. So this, I was going to show you the seed starting mixture, and we're going to have a chance to actually wet it ourselves. This, it's in the back of the truck, and you can see it. There's a few different brands. You want to start. You're going to have your best success. You could definitely use garden soil from your garden, but it's going to be heavier, and it's also. So if you go to any garden center, you can get like a seed starting mix, and it's the best thing about it is that it's really lightweight. And you can look, this has a mixture of peat, it's got vermiculite, so it's really lightweight. And so that means as soon as the seeds germinate, they're going to have an easier time popping through the soil, and their roots are going to have an easier time than if you just use regular garden soil that's around here, especially, it's going to have more clay to it. But the trick is when you buy these bags, especially if the bags are inside the building as opposed to being outside, they're going to be dry when you open the bags up. And so you really need to soak the mix really well.
Before you put the seeds.
Yes, because I've had bad experience. That's kind of one of the, I've filled this up with the dry material and then sowed my seeds and then watered it, and you just have to keep adding so much water, and then the seeds move around and they're not where you're going to have much better success, thanks, if you pre-wet it before you put it in the container. And then, because I'm growing these indoors and I don't want to have I'm trying to keep my house a little bit clean, I've been using containers that are completely solid and don't have holes. In the greenhouse, the ones we have, I think, are slightly perforated, which just means they can be a little bit heavier handed when they're watering because it can drain out. But when I'm starting the seeds, you want to provide moisture, warmth, and air. And and also by it being lightweight, even though it's moist, like you want the texture of the seed mixture to be kind of like a wrung out sponge, but you don't want it to be sogging because they need to, unless it was a wetland plant, it's going to need air also. But it's helpful to kind of create that greenhouse-like climate. You're going to have a warm condition, like we said, to put this on somewhere in the warm part of your house, like on your top of your refrigerator or radiator, or if you have a heat mat, or you could use a heating pad. But give it like a little.
Why on top of is the top of the refrigerator warm? Mm-hmm. I never knew that.
Even the bottom, like I realized that when we didn't have air conditioning last summer, the air coming out of the bottom of our fridge was really warm. So just find like a warm spot. Is there maybe one room in your house that's warmer?
I remember my dog.
It's basically it's like a, what do you call it, a heat pump. And what the heat pump does, it expels warmth, and that's how it keeps it cold inside. So it's got to kick that warmth out somewhere, and wherever it's coming out.
Is it just look around your house and try to find a warm spot. But covering it right when you've sowed the seeds until the seeds germinate is helpful, just because it keeps that moisture in, keeps that heat in. But you still want to open this up every day. You don't want it to get. You want to make sure that you're getting fresh air in. And that's why these clamshells are kind of nice, because they already have a container.
So how long would you keep it open?
So as soon as just, for a minute, or just really lets fresh air in. But as soon as the seeds germinate, you want to take the cover off, because you don't want the plant to touch the plastic. And then you want to get I think the next biggest mistake people make when they sow their own seeds indoors is they need light. And it's, you can grow them in a cup on a windowsill, but I'm sure if you've ever done that, the plant's going to be bending towards the light. And the problem is if they don't get enough light, they're growing, trying to get to the light, and they get really leggy, and there's just a lot more chance that stem's going to break, and they're not going to be strong. So, what I've done is, what I've found works is just to go to the hardware store and get a couple shop lights. Or you might already have some in your basement, or And you don't need to get fancy grow lights. Just
Does the light need to be that close?
you want to have it really close. You don't want it to touch it, but even if it touches it, it's fluorescent, so it's not going to burn them. But like 4 inches, you don't really want to have it any farther away than 4 inches. So, and I've got actually some pictures on my phone. I'm sorry, I should have had you put them on your iPad. But to show you what I've got at home. And I've hung them when I had a house with a basement. I just hung them from a chain in the basement, and that I could lower and then I could raise as I needed to. I've used a table like this where I've put little hooks in the table and I've hung them from there and had them on the ground. I've used bookshelves. I've even just used books and put the lights on either end of the books, and then I can add a book on each time I need to raise it, and that's probably the easiest. But you really need to give your plants light. So I'd say if there's anything you're going to buy besides seed starting mixture, it would be a shop lamp.
And then do you use the grow bulbs?
Nope, you can just use fluorescent lights. I don't honestly even know if it makes a difference, but from what I've read and what I've been doing the last few years, but I can't really tell the difference. I've used one cool white and one warm light. So that you're getting, I guess the idea is you're getting all the different wavelengths. But, let's see, pass this around. So I bought, and it's really chintzy. My husband pretty much reinforced it so much but it's just a light stand. But I mean, just like I say, hanging it from your ceiling or a table will work just as well.
These seeds that we're going to sow today are actually going to go on some concrete. This is for a garden that a group of us are putting together. They're going to be on some concrete, so they'll have thermal mass.
Okay.
But I wish I had brought my cold frame down that I built here last fall. Do you sell cold frames here, even little ones, or?
I don't think we have any. We have in the past, but I don't know if we have any extras right now. But we're gonna we're gonna teach workshops on how to build them.
Yeah.
So you're gonna sew them and keep them outside in a cold frame.
Well, yeah. If I had the cold frame, I wish I'd brought it.
Just buy painter's plastic and cover
Okay.
them, as long as it's
Yeah.
not touching the plants.
Yeah.
And I
Alright.
can show you later, like some different things you could do, like with windows or like she said, plastic.
Or even just some plastic.
Yeah, actually, when I saved this from the trash, my intent was to not use it for starting soil, but to flip it over. I was gonna punch a hole in it and stick like a stick and make a little mini greenhouse out of this.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there's
Old
some.
windows work really well.
Yeah.
If you get like
Like some
4
bricks.
bales of hay or bricks, then you just lay the window on top.
Oh,
and
okay,
put all the
perfect.
stuff inside, yeah.
Yeah, we're all set then. We got both.
If
those.
you have compost too, you can put it in there and it'll get it sometimes too hot.
Really?
Yeah.
So Stacey, you were saying it was okay though, like if I wanted to have lettuce, I don't know, broccoli, potatoes, whatever, I could do the seeds all in one flat. I don't have to have a carrot flat, a potato
Correct.
flat. Okay.
So, like what I would do, like I've already transplanted these. I had like 3 rows of spinach. I was experimenting because I had some old seeds and some new seeds, and so I labeled one spinach old, spinach new. I had like 2 rows of chard. So I grew like 10 different varieties of things, and I only had maybe 10 plants of each, and then I've transplanted them. So I thought we'd all try. Lauren and I were talking about when we were getting ready for this workshop is different techniques for seed sowing, and I thought we'd show you some different and have you guys actually practice, and then I'm getting you guys to help me sow my seeds. So we've got we have. I was going to show you kind of how I do it, and Lauren, you can chime in because Lauren's, she and her sister have a small farm in Loudon, and so you've done probably a lot more seed sowing than I have.
But we pretty much always do, unless we're doing like a salad mix. If it's in a salad mix, it'll be in those open containers. But the ones with the dividers in it is normally what we'll use.
You were saying, so basically you start out with these already in them, and then you have soil mix in them, and then you were saying you take your finger and punch holes, and then you'll take the other one and use the indentations from the other one. So you'd basically be going like
And then we'll put a seed in, take a handful, sprinkle it over, and then use the tray that we're gonna sow on top of it. We'll just put the tray out over it, press it in.
So just a little bit of weight.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then you can make like a stack of trays, and you can leave them like that until they germinate.
So maybe we'll do.
So it's okay to leave them stacked?
Yeah, for a day or two, you know.
Okay.
I mean, you don't want them growing
So I'm
into
gonna-
Well, I wouldn't think so.
You want to demonstrate with cilantro?
Sounds really efficient.
These are the bigger seeds.
So there's no like, pull out a yardstick and go down 1.5 inches or
No,
anything
not-
like that.
Danny's pretty exact about it.
You could if you want to.
The general rule of thumb for how deep to sow seeds. So I brought
might have been a
different
little
sizes of seeds.
You
Is
only
like
put one in,
2
right?
to 3
Yeah.
times the depth of your seed.
But these are.
But I really don't worry about it anymore. And I've
Okay.
worked with kids where I've tried to tell them that, and they'll bury the lettuce and be like way down here, and it'll all come up. So
Yeah.
It might even be better for the root system.
Well,
'cause
that's
it
what I
has
think-
to go up a whole.
yeah, for years I wasn't having good success with beets and radishes, and I was like, what's? So I kept saying, Josh, our farmer, like why? But what he's doing is he's sowing them deeper, and then he's kind of hilling them. So I think those things, especially because they're roots, I was sowing them too shallowly.
Now beets, because they're a root, you don't transplant those. You,
Right. I mean, you could, but you're gonna probably have better success if you don't. So did you?
Yeah, these are all done.
So you just covered them up, and then if you're doing a whole bunch, like an
And
assembly
then,
line.
yeah, like you would put this on top to press it in instead of, because this one might have more dividers,
Gotcha,
so it'd be
yeah.
bigger. So instead of going to each one and
Sure.
closing up the hole, you just press it in, throw some soil
Nice.
over it, and then leave them stacked.
Cool.
But salad greens, we found if you're doing like a greens mix, we were growing microgreens for a while, which is just basically just tiny little seedlings that you harvest for like garnish for restaurants.
Yes.
And that we would grow in the open trays.
So you end up with a living salad.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, you cut up the whole salad off of one tray.
Yum.
Yeah, and it comes already mixed. You can buy a microgreen mix, which has like beets and kale and things like that.
So what I do when I'm trying to sow like a whole flat, I'll put the seed mix in and make sure it's nice and moist. You know, it's not sopping wet, but it kind of stays together. And then I sort of pack it down because you can see how it's pretty lightweight. And then I just make little furrows. And you know, if I was going to be exact, I would make my furrows deeper or shallower depending on what size seed. But I kind of just make a, I don't know, I guess it's 1/4 of an inch or so deep. And then I take my seeds. Let's see. So I brought, for us to practice with, I brought some old lettuce seeds that I don't know if they're going to germinate or not. And then some cilantro seeds, which are bigger, like the ones that Lauren just used. And I just, so these are really small, so they really don't need to be buried very deep. And I just, as much as I can, I try to sow them, I try to have an idea as to how big, well, I'm going to be transplanting them. If I, here, so I can sow them pretty thickly, but you probably don't want them right next to each other because it's gonna be more difficult. You'll see when we're transplanting them. So I try to give them a little bit of space in between, but I don't worry about it too much because
Some taken, some down.
right, especially these are old seeds. So like I guess when I was sowing I had some old spinach seeds that I didn't think were very good, and some new ones, and so So say these are my spinach seeds, I just pretty much filled the whole daggone channel with seeds. And versus the ones that I knew were probably really good, I was more sparsely sowing them.
That's lovely. Oh, yeah.
So, and then once I've sowed the seeds, I just kind of cover them up. And then they need to have contact with the soil, so you want to pack them in. And then I go ahead and cover them up, put them in a warm place, and then wait until I check them every day. And then as soon as I see signs of growth, I get them under the light. There's other ways, like I put it in your handout, kind of different sowing, since we talked about sowing them at the right depth, if you're gonna sow, like you probably, I don't know if you ever sowed grass seed, for your lawn, you're not gonna be that exact. You're gonna more broadcast them. So that's and then probably what you do with your salad mix, you probably broadcast them. So, and if you're sowing directly in the garden and you're not gonna be transplanting them, for things like that lettuce mix and things, broadcasting is perfectly good. The only trick is giving them a little bit of cover afterwards, which is a little more difficult when you broadcast because you're gonna have to cover the whole area versus just that furrow.
Is that to attract like a flock of birds that then just go picking them out, or?
Yeah,
Cover it with
sometimes
hay.
they might.
What happens if you put light on it when you just plant them?
So, and
will
that's
it
the thing
hurt
is,
them?
there are some plants I didn't really go. There most of the varieties of things you're going to be growing for your vegetables are plants that they don't need light. They don't need light to germinate. They just need warmth, moisture, and non-saturated conditions. As soon as they come up, they need the light. There are some plants, especially a lot of our weeds, which is why you'll go to prepare your garden soil, and then you're like, daggone it, those aren't my vegetable seedlings that are coming up, those are all the weed seeds. So those are things that can be really shallowly at the surface, or they actually need light to germinate. There are some things that need light to germinate, but pretty much all the vegetables you grow, they don't need light. So you could put the light on them actually as another source of heat. Or if you're going to go away for the weekend and you're afraid they might germinate while you're gone, it's not going to hurt them to give them the light, but it's not necessary.
Okay.
Also, if you're sowing outdoors, if you clear an area to plant, make sure you plant very soon after you clear the area, because any weed seed that's in there is going to get a head start.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
that the
they
hard
say
way.
like you plant it or Mother Nature will do it for you. So,
And sometimes I've even worked the soil and then waited till the weed seeds come up and then
Yeah,
kind of
that's
scrape
another
them
thing,
away
yeah.
before I actually sow what I want.
Yeah, because I read that you're supposed to turn the soil in fall. Is that not true?
I guess it depends. But
I think that's mainly for if you really want to get it's good. That'd be the good time to get your soil ready. But
to pull
mostly
out
so
any
that you
old
don't
things.
have to really get in there and
So
work
it's
it.
not too late for me to turn my soil.
It's the main thing is to prevent, I think, people from working in your soil when it's really wet. When the snow just melted a few weeks ago. If you had gone in there and really worked it, especially when we have clay here, that could break up your soil and make it almost like concrete. So I think that's the main reason. Farmers a lot of times will prepare in the fall.
yeah, and it's good to just get all your things that have rotted in the field. You want to take all that out because a lot of insect pests live in that roughage. So if you can just make sure you keep a clean spot, it's really good for pest control.
So I thought if everybody wants to just practice sowing in furrows, and then the other thing is, I thought maybe we'd put some cilantro in here, and you could definitely do it in furrows. But should have brought some bean plants, but a bean seed is going to be, or a sunflower seed is going to be bigger. Especially if I'm growing it in the ground and or squash seeds, I usually just use there's anything out there if you want to buy it. They have, it's called a dibble. It's technically the term for this little pointy,
That you can use instead of your finger?
yes. But I just think this is a perfectly good tool.
I think the
cheaper.
finger will look
Finger's a lot less expensive.
Yeah.
And I've seen in gardening books where if you're doing the whole rows, you might get tired of sticking your finger in. So they have sticks specially made with
The funnest part about being in the garden
with
is getting your
fingers
hands
that would
dirty.
go
You could use the end of a utensil.
Yeah, so I've used just plastic to make my furrows. I use kind of whatever I have lying around, like the sticks or my knife or this, or my finger would work perfectly well too. It kind of just depends on how many of you're doing. And if you're going to be doing a whole farm's worth, then you might want to get some of the equipment that's they even have wheels that will seed for you, and you can adjust them depending on the seed size. So And then I was thinking we put parsley in here, which is pretty much gonna be similar to lettuce. Oh, and I wanted to show you, so I'll use these to start my seeds, and it's nice because so they don't need light, so it's perfectly good to put this on there. And then once they germinate,
That's a cake thing, right?
yeah, once they germinate,
Gives me a good excuse to go buy a cake.
then you're gonna want to water more, and it might get too waterlogged. So I've learned that I can't poke holes very well. I guess I could use a drill, but usually I end up breaking the plastic. So what I've done is I just take a lighter and I just melt a few holes, and then this might not be the best, but the clamshells work better. Then I have like a little tray for my water. And then sometimes I'll use these for several years. Cheap.
Yeah,
But
Great.
it's recycling too.
Yeah.
Really important.
because these things, I went to Southern State this morning. I meant to look. These things can get really pricey. So I use these until they're like at death's door, and then I try to collect these. So if anybody wants to practice sewing, don't. Here's some.
You were saying, talking about a bean seed, and you didn't have one to demonstrate. I've got some peas in the car if you want to bring those over. I think those are normally direct sow, but I can
Yeah.
contribute a few of
That's
those.
okay. I mean, I think the cilantro. I just wanted to. I don't know. In my mind, I was thinking because beans you would normally direct sow in the garden. You wouldn't want to sow in here. I didn't want to waste them.
Compost. If you,
I have
I
compost.
forgot that I bought this a couple hours ago, but now we have another planting container.
yeah, just buy
Now, when you said you pack it, Stacey, when I watched you over here, do you actually like physically push?
Yeah, I push it down. I don't go like
Okay.
really hard.
Okay.
Just
like no matter what we're gonna do.
just to cover them up because you want to make sure that the seeds having contact with the soil.
Okay.
Um,
Should I mark where I've done this for you, or is
Nah,
it not
that's
okay?
okay. And if this is cilantro seed that I grew last year, and so if I'm giving you guys to go home with seeds that I know will germinate, I'm giving you some, and ones that are good for growing indoors, peppers, California Wonder peppers, and then butter crunch lettuce. But if you guys want, I've got extra envelopes if you want some cilantro seeds. I just didn't want to give you the cilantro seeds in case they didn't germinate.
I want to know how to keep it from going to seed once it comes up.
Well,
I've gotten to the point I just like don't even want to grow cilantro.
I am actually just growing mostly now for the seed because I put that in like my pickles and stuff.
Okay.
There's another type of plant called an Asian cilantro that I grow, and it doesn't bolt. And it tastes just like it.
And that's what I want.
What about sweet potato seeds? Is there anything special about those?
Sweet potatoes,
Or do you just actually put the sweet potato in there? Yes.
yeah, so I don't know if you can grow sweet potatoes from that's Lauren had wanted to talk about that too in terms of there's some things that don't that either propagate like mint they do sell mint seeds and they'll grow, but it's so easy to propagate from a root.
Yeah, so you would chop up the eye of the potato?
Yeah, so
basically?
for potatoes are different. For potatoes, they have the eyes, and you can either use whole potatoes or you can cut your potatoes. You know how they have the little indentation, the eyes where it's going to sprout. You can cut them up into so they have like 2 or 3 eyes.
And you did what you did when you were in second grade. You put it with 2 toothpicks and
Yeah, I actually just
need that.
Last year was the first year I grew potatoes, and you wanna, because they're gonna grow. The trick with potatoes is, you know, that when if they get exposed to light, they turn green, and that actually can make you sick. So you need to keep them covered. And because they're constantly growing, so what the general technique is to dig like a big ditch, kind of a trench, put them in the bottom, cut up into pieces so they each have 2 or 3 eyes, cover them up with a few inches of soil, and then as they start growing, you constantly are covering them up.
So that's a direct sow, not a start. So you don't know anybody that really starts
I
them
don't
indoors?
know if you could even grow potatoes. I think because some things, I don't think they would.
go to the Elwood Thompson's if you just bought some sweet potatoes or potatoes, and you can cut them up yourself at home. And a lot of times, you'll buy potatoes and forget about them, and then you go to get them from the pantry, and they're already sprouted for you.
you're talking about.
Like, okay, I'll just
Maybe
plant
if you
these.
probably, I think some potatoes and potatoes are treated, and where they might not sprout as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'd get it elsewhere.
Yeah, if you get, I would imagine organic ones, they wouldn't
Yeah.
do that process.
Sweet potatoes, maybe you can, well, you can cut them up, but what I've had best success where I take the whole sweet potato, like say this is one. Yeah.
And the sweet potatoes have beautiful foliage. It's just gorgeous, and you can actually
And you
make
can
it
eat
green.
the foliage.
pretty.
So if
Serious?
you want it, they're great.
Oh
That
my
is a
God.
serious sweet
Okay.
potato.
They're really good for like your container
say that
gardening
for
on your
me?
patio, just because they're really beautiful.
That wasn't even the biggest one.
Yeah, they get
Did
really
you say
big.
that for me?
We grew ones this
Yeah.
past season, remember?
I had a
That
friend
is
give me one from Matthews
huge.
County, and I'm not
The
exaggerating.
reason I asked about sweet potatoes specifically is I know they come from the tropics, so I think they don't like the cold.
Right.
Unlike
You
know,
want to pull
really-
them out of the ground before frost, or it'll
Yeah.
ruin the flesh.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So I'm thinking if I'm growing them up there, I'm actually growing them at a friend's farm up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. So I want to get them growing early so they don't run into the frost in the fall. But early, it's got the frost risk there in spring. So that's
Yeah.
what I was thinking. Starting
Put them on
it,
here.
yeah, starting
think-
indoors and then transplanting. Awesome.
I didn't list them on here because I made a chart at the end of when to sow things, but so I wouldn't put sweet potatoes in the ground until the beginning of May. Because our
This is exactly what I needed.
frost-free day
Yeah, isn't
here
that
is going to be about April 20th, and then we could get a
Stacey
frost
made this,
again
I know,
until
it's like
like in
this area.
mid-October. So it's going to be different there in the Blue Ridge. It's probably going to be more like early. You might want to wait till mid-May.
But you do recommend just going right into the ground with potatoes as opposed to starting.
Yeah, for potatoes, but sweet potatoes are a lot more cold tolerant. You can put potatoes in the ground now.
Okay.
Sweet potatoes are a tropical plant, and you gotta wait. So
Okay.
I would wait until
But
I guess I don't have it here. I would wait until April 15th, and then I would start my sweet potatoes. And the way I do that is I say this is the surface of my soil, and I don't know. This is a big potato, but my teacher was telling me that the bigger the sweet potato, the better.
Yeah.
I've
Why
been
is that?
saving. I've been saving my small ones just because they're the ones that I'm not
The
eating.
bigger it is, the easier for what?
You'll get more sprouts.
Oh, more sprouts.
This seems
okay, thank you.
excessive, but anyway.
See, I always thought that smaller ones were tastier.
Yeah, I mean, I've been using my smaller ones because that's all I usually have left by the end of the season. I've eaten
But
all the
Isabel
rest.
told me that's not true.
I don't think it's true. I think a large potato tastes like
I think it depends on how long
The age.
it
How long you
cures,
cure them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So stick this in the ground. It's almost like a torpedo coming up, or a submarine coming up. So it's half up and half in the ground. And the soil needs to be moist. And then within a week or so, you'll start seeing, or you might already have some potatoes that already have sprouts. They'll start to sprout up, and little leaves will form. And all you do is just take take a knife or even just prick them off, and then you stick the sprout, pretend this is the sprout, or this is the sprout, stick it in the soil and just kind of tuck it in, and then it'll form roots, and then that's the thing is the longer they're in the soil, the bigger they're going to get. So
When you say pull the sprout, do you cut any of the potato out?
I've done both. I have not noticed a difference between when I've actually taken a knife and like cut out part of the sweet potato versus when you just kind of pulling off the
So
little
does
sprout.
it kind of naturally breaks off of the potato?
Yeah, it just sprouts, and then you just stick the sprout in, tuck it in, and the trick is because usually I'm not starting them until April 15th. They don't really get going where I can transplant them until May 15th probably, and then by then it can be really hot. So what I did last year is I just took something to, like I used some piping, or I had some metal, like those political signs without the signs in, just the metal frame, and made like a little tunnel, and then I took some burlap, so I gave them some shade.
Shade. Yeah, they like shade too.
And then I mulched it really well, and then once they get going, they're pretty drought tolerant, and I got 46 pounds of potatoes.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's all good.
I was thinking that maybe we should do like a mini workshop at the farm stand showing how to do sweet potatoes. I think,
maybe this one we can get to sprout.
yeah.
Yeah, that would
Yeah.
be great.
That's
I want to
the
grow
last
sweet
one left.
potatoes really
I've
bad.
heard of people growing them all winter inside their house with the vines all over the place, almost like house plants.
Yeah, and you can eat. I don't know. You can eat the foliage. It tastes like spinach. Apparently,
It's so good for like dips and stuff, like
Oh, wow.
cheese and sweet potatoes.
That sounds
So
great.
good.
And the other thing too is I've heard that if you just plant sweet potatoes out the wazoo, like all over the place, and then you don't even get to harvest all of them, or you just harvest some, they'll
Some will
turn
come
into a mulch, and basically they'll make the soil more fertile for the next year. Like it's a great way to like,
Oh, from the leaves dying down?
yeah, to break down the soil, yeah, the leaves and everything. And so it's a way to, anyway. So it just seems like kind of like a magical plant.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe my 4th year, and
Incredibly healthy
Yeah.
for you.
they're really good. They're really easy to
Very,
grow.
very healthy.
And I mean, yeah, just get an organic sweet potato, and
Just do what you said.
So I think I'll start it inside my friend's greenhouse, and then
that would give you a jump start.
yeah, when
definitely.
the frost risk is passed, then I'll do the shoot.
Yeah, as long as you're past like the frost free date. And if you get cold nights, you could probably just take something like this or a milk jug and I would wait till or before you really set them out until like beginning of May. Does everybody have enough? Do they want to sow seeds or?
I did. Thank you.
Okay. Jumping around.
Or keep doing it. These are so much.
I think what we'll do next is because let's see, I want to make sure I cover everything.
I don't even.
If you sow your things way too thick, or say you sow them in the ground and and you're not going to transplant them, they definitely, if they're you need to make sure that they have enough room to grow, and that's probably the next hardest thing I think is thinning them, and I have a hard time with it still because you're killing your babies, but you just think about it. I mean, sometimes you can eat what you thin, and the way I thin it, I try not to pull when I'm weeding or when I'm thinning because I'm afraid that might damage the roots of the plants I want to keep. But just take some little like embroidery scissors and cut the extra ones out. Or if it's in this lightweight mix, you could definitely just pull it.
Well, if you go to cut it though, the root part still stays the same. So aren't you still in danger of overcrowding?
Because those roots will just die.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it said here that where was it? Transplant. Generally, once the seedling develops, its first set of true leaves, and before it develops its second set of true leaves.
Yeah, it's kind of just a rule of thumb. Like you could actually, as soon as they come up, you could transplant them then. But they're so little, you're gonna have a hard time finding them. Generally, and then if you wait until when the plants, well, we can see them in the greenhouse. The first leaves that usually come up are their cotyledon is the term, or baby leaves, and they usually don't look anything like their parent. They're not gonna, they don't look at all like the plant. But then the next set of leaves that comes out look like miniature, mature leaves. And just the longer, so that's generally a good time to start transplanting. If you wait much longer, I guess the other thing I didn't talk about is this seed starting mix. So they don't need any nutrients to germinate because their seed gives them all the nutrient they need to germinate. But once they've gotten that first set of leaves is when they're going to start needing nutrients beyond their own seed. So that's the other main reason for transplanting them, is to give them something richer. And so usually we would, you still want to use like somewhat of a lightweight mix, but amend it with some compost or fertilizer.
When do you put the compost? When you
transplant.
When you transplant them into with the compost.
And if you're going to start your seeds in cell packs and you're going to keep them in there until you put them in your garden and you're going to let them get bigger, then you're going to either want to have started out with some nutrients in that seed mix, or you're going to need to add it. And I know.
What happens if you have to wait longer to transplant because it's still cold?
Yeah, I would still, when I'm growing seeds indoors of summer plants like tomatoes, peppers, I will start them in here. I'll transplant them, and I keep the transplant indoors too. And then I'll usually transplant them again before I put them out in the garden. So
So it doesn't hurt it to be transplanted more than once. I mean, you go from here to there to the garden.
Right. I mean, and there's lots of debate, but a lot of the studies they've done show that the transplanting is good for them because it forces their roots to be more active. So
Sure.
Fresher soil.
And you're not
too.
shocking them either. You're not going
Yeah.
from this teeny little bit to the outside ground. That,
Right.
that would make sense.
Yeah.
If it's too cold to put them outside, you just keep putting them into a bigger pot until you get to a point where it's warm.
So transplanting is just the term we're using from taking them from when they're in this to another container. But I think maybe what you're talking about, once you put them in the garden, that's called like setting them out. So why don't we do some hands-on transplanting, and then we'll come back and talk about setting out once we transplant.
Do you want people so they're
Seeds here.
Yes.
flat of seeds here?
Well, you'll get the kit.
They could. Well, I was
You can
gonna.
get it either way.
I was gonna have you guys. I didn't know if your cars. I was thinking it'd be easier for you. I've got trays in the truck with a Ziploc bag of soil, and then 2 packets of seeds. Thinking you could take them home to sow. But if you wanted to,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to take mine home.
yeah.
I have a job I have to go to. So.
That's okay. Well, if you want to sew here, that's fine.
Yeah, we can stay with you and help you with
Once I
that.
get home, I'd like to be able to set them where I want them at the
Yeah.
house. So.
But we're gonna do the transplanting in the greenhouse. I think it's cool down, and it's warmer.